Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. I'm on my way to go hiking with my dog, who's actually not my dog, but my princess. And I thought I'd share with you some perspectives on the recent state convention in Maine that took place around 10 days ago. And this has been recorded a couple days before the upcoming state convention in Connecticut. Well, in Maine, unlike the Libertarian Party convention in South Carolina, there was no debate. Each candidate was given 15 minutes to give a presentation of his views on the presidential race. So I've posted my 15-minute talk on my campaign website and on YouTube. You can see it at jacobforliberty.com. And I would invite you to do so because it contains really critically important perspectives on why the Libertarian Party continues to be consigned to the standard chronic 1% of the national vote. The Libertarian Party, in the latest 2 Wall Street Journal polls, gets 1%, which is essentially what our presidential candidate got 3 years ago. And as I told the convention in South Carolina and in Maine, the standard popular response to this is because we just haven't gotten our message out, or that we haven't gotten into the debates. And I hold that those are just fallacious excuses. That in fact, the real reason for this chronic standard 1% is that we've got a bad message. And we've had a bad message for some 20, 25 years. And that message is one of welfare, warfare, state reform measures, and Republican light. So during the Q&A session there at the Maine convention, an interesting point was raised. And that is that if the Libertarian Party presidential candidate can just spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on advertising, that would enable us to finally break free of this 1%. And this 1% I hold as a max. I mean, that's the maximum. If Bobby Kennedy Jr. ends up getting on enough state ballots, I think he's going to undoubtedly suck the wind out of any standard Libertarian Party candidate, that is a candidate that hews to this message of reform and Republican light. And we very well may see ourselves getting back down to the 0.05 or 0.03 that was the standard during the Harry Brown era. So there's no reason why we can't go down from this 1%, but 1% is clearly the max because the 2 Wall Street Journal polls are already telling us what voters are feeling, that they're rejecting us on a 99% basis. And as I told both conventions, I'm with the 99%. I will vote Libertarian to get our numbers up, but I'm with the 99% in the rejection of this message that has become standard for presidential candidates in this party. It's a bad message. In my opinion, it deserves to be rejected. So what about this notion that if you just spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the message out, that will increase the vote totals? Entirely fallacious. Entirely fallacious. And the example I used in my talk at the Maine convention, which again I would invite you to watch, 15 minutes at jacobforliberty.com, is that we can look at the Chase Oliver race in Georgia as proof that that's a fallacious notion. Now, Chase, of course, is one of the competitors for the presidential nomination this time around. But a year ago, he was in the race there in Georgia, statewide race, U.S. Senate, and Chase got more publicity than I think our presidential candidate in 2020 got by a factor of maybe 100 or 500 or so. I mean, it was incredible how much publicity he got. Bloomberg, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. If you were going to buy the kind of advertising that Chase got, you would have to spend, I think, $10-20 million. I don't know, but certainly in the millions of dollars. Now, his advertising was free because he was the critical factor on whether there was going to be a runoff between the Democrat, Raphael Warnock, and the Republican, Herschel Walker. And so Chase got this unbelievable amount of publicity he got, and to his credit, he should be commended for it. He got named the most influential libertarian in America by Rolling Stone magazine. And he got into the debate, one of the debates there, against Raphael Warnock. Walker didn't show up. And so Chase had half the time there to get his message out. Now, what was his message? Well, he made it clear in that debate. He said, my message, and he was exhorting people to vote for him. He says, I will be a better proponent of small government and lower taxes. That was his term. Small government and lower taxes than Herschel Walker. Okay? So that's his central message. Now, is that a popular mantra? Absolutely. In the Republican Party. See, that's one of the most popular mantras in the Republican Party. Small government, lower taxes. But what's successful in the Republican Party doesn't translate into success for the Libertarian Party candidate. Because at the end of this process, where every single voter in Georgia knew what Chase's message was, there's no question about that. I mean, all this massive publicity, he got his message out. If there's any Libertarian Party candidate who cannot say that he did not get his message out, it's Chase Oliver. And at the end of the process, 98% of Georgia voters said, no, we're not going to vote for you. And it wasn't anything personal, because if you've met Chase Oliver, you know that he's one of the nicest, friendliest, most sincere, genuine, passionate, dedicated people you'd ever meet. It was because of this message, this reform-oriented, Republican-like message that has become standard in our party, that's popular in the Republican Party, and the notion's always been that Republicans maybe will just come over and cross party lines and vote for the Libertarian candidate who hews to small government, lower taxes, but they never do, and they never will. It's a bad message. And so if you were going to buy that same kind of publicity in a presidential race, you'd spend maybe, what, $20-30 million? And what good would it do? And what good would it do to get in the debates if it's the message itself that people are rejecting, which is obviously the case? Now, people say, well, Jacob, your message can't do any better. But, on the contrary. And as I pointed out at the Maine LP convention, 20 years ago, I ran for a U.S. Senate in Virginia. Same statewide race that Chase ran. And I was running against one of the most popular governors in the history of the state, John Warner. The Democrats didn't even run somebody. They knew they couldn't win. The LaRouches ran a candidate, and she undoubtedly got all the Democrat votes, because I'm calling for the abolition of Social Security and Medicare, no off-ramps, gradualism, opt-outs, and all that other reform nonsense for me. I was calling for the abolition of public schooling, no vouchers or any other socialist reform plan, open borders. And so I knew no Democrat would vote for me, but I also knew that no Republican would vote for me, because I was saying, this was 2002, this was right after the 9/11 attacks, and I was saying that U.S. foreign policy was the driving, motivating force behind those attacks, which is the same point that Ron Paul would make some 6 years later in that famous debate that he had with Giuliani and the other Republican opponents for the nomination. So I knew no Republican would vote for me either, and I didn't care. At the end of this process, I ended up getting 7% of the statewide vote. This is 20 years ago, when hardly anyone even knew what libertarianism was, because there's a big block of votes out there, of voters who love our principles. They may not be members of our party, they may not want to get involved, but they will vote for these principles, and I proved that. And notice the irony, though, that there's people inside our party who loathe these principles, loathe them, in favor of reform and Republican light, while there's people out there who absolutely love our principles. And will vote for these principles, but will never vote for a reform-oriented Republican-like Libertarian Party candidate. They want to vote for somebody that hews to these principles 100% without exception. 3 years ago, I had the same experience. I entered the primaries when I was seeking the LP presidential nomination. There was 9 presidential primaries before the nominating convention. I won 7 out of those 9 primaries, not because I was spending any money, because I didn't have much money to spend, just like I didn't 20 years ago. But there's people out there that love these principles. This is what people inside our party just do not recognize, or at least many people in our party do not recognize. that in this quest to get Republican light and reform, they don't realize that there's a large number of people out there who will love our principles, just as I love our principles. So it doesn't make any difference. Money is not the key to this. That all you have to do is get the message straight. And this is what I've been saying, is that we need to move this party in a totally different direction, completely different direction, not partially, a completely different direction, that away from this notion of reform and Republican light. And we need to restore the brand of principled libertarianism that was our founding principles of this party. And then we need to run a presidential campaign that hews 100%, no exceptions, open borders, abolish socialism and Social Security and Medicare and all the other socialist programs, public schooling, etc. And that hews without any exception to these genuine, pure, true libertarian principles. If we do that, then I have no doubts I could double the 7% I got 20 years ago. I mean, we've made a lot of progress in 20 years. Libertarianism is practically a household term. And there's a large number of people out there that are ready to vote for these principles, that are not ready to vote for a reform-oriented Republican-light message. And so if we want to break out to the 10 or 15% level, there's only one way to do that. And that's to run this kind of principled campaign for the party of principle. If we want to stay at 1%, then the best way to do that is to continue doing what we've done over and over and over again and expecting a different result. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and my campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.